A few of you have asked for tips on mixing guitars, and honestly, it's one of the harder instruments to get right in a mix. It might seem like your guitars are constantly fighting with the rest of the mix. Like maybe they're buried and they just don't sound like they're cutting through. Or maybe they're sounding like they're covering everything else up in the mix and making it hard to hear. And it can be really hard to find the perfect sweet spot for guitars. So today we're gonna look at this pop punk session, and I'm gonna simplify and break down exactly what you need to know in order to get your guitars to cut through, to sound massive and huge in the mix, and to still leave plenty of room for your vocals and other elements of your mix to cut through. Let's get started. So first, take a listen to this session we're working with and pay attention to the rhythm guitars.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down, at the worst time when you were down, when you needed me to just stick around, I just vanished on you.
So right now we're hearing the drums sound big and punchy, the bass sounds really fat and full, and the vocals are really well balanced, but the rhythm guitars aren't quite cutting through as much as I would like. It's not that they're inaudible, they just sound kind of flat and buried in the mix. So naturally our first instinct whenever something isn't cutting through enough should be to try to turn it up in the mix. So we're just going to turn up the gain on the rhythm guitars right here.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down, at the worst time when you were down, when you needed me to just stick around, I just vanished on you. You gave me your heart and I dropped it.
So that's definitely a bit overboard, but you can tell now the guitars are really cutting through and they sound much bigger. But obviously this is now covering up the vocals, and the vocals are incredibly hard to hear because we have these loud guitars in our face. Even if we back this off to a more tasteful setting, you're still going to notice how when those guitars are playing, the vocals sound really buried and hard to hear. Take a listen to that.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down, at the worst time when you were down, when you needed me to just stick around, I just vanished on you. You gave me your heart and I dropped it.
Like right there on the word your heart, it just sounds like the vocal is taking a backseat to the guitar when it's playing. And we don't want that. We want everything to sound big and full. So just giving it level isn't going to work here. What we need to do is get those guitars to cut through at the right place in the mix so that they don't step on or bother the vocal at all, but they kind of fill the gaps where the vocal isn't. That way both can sound big at the same time. I almost like to think of it like the vocal is the main centerpiece and we're just wrapping those guitars around the vocal wherever they fit. So whenever you have distorted guitars like this and a vocal, we have to understand which part of the frequency range is clashing between those two instruments. And generally it's the low mids and mids. That's because that's where the fundamental frequencies are for both guitars and vocals, generally speaking. But the bite and presence of guitars generally comes from the high mid range. And while those frequencies are also important for vocals, we can get away with a lot more guitar happening there, as long as it's not also happening in the lower mids. So let me show you some tricks I like to use to achieve this effect. I've got X-Rack Pro loaded on this guitar bus, which has the left and right rhythm guitar panned out left and right. It's just a simple double tracked guitar. And the first thing I'm going to do is load up the bus sat mode on the saturate module. And I love this for guitars, especially if we push this slider up just slightly towards crisp. It's just going to lift up the guitars in a really subtle but pleasant way. Take a listen to what this does. It's a very subtle tone shaping thing, but it really does make a difference when we stack it all together in the chain. So the next thing I'm going to do is move over to the tone module. And this is where we're going to do the bulk of our tone shaping. And specifically on guitars, I love this clarity mode. This mode models a classic American EQ, which has proportional Q curves. And what that means is the Q is going to depend on how much we're boosting or cutting. So you can see that that Q is going to get narrower if we boost more, and it's going to be a bit broader if we boost less. And I've found it works incredibly well on a lot of different instruments, but especially guitars. So let's try tone shaping these guitars a bit.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down, at the worst time when you were down, when you needed me to just stick around, I just vanished on you. You gave me your heart and I dropped it. You gave me your trust and I broke it. I wish.
So So we can see what I'm doing here is pushing up the high mids and pulling down the mids at the same time. And this is something I like to do whenever I'm tone shaping. And I'm about to share a sort of philosophical approach to EQ that has helped me get much better mixes, and I think it'll help you as well. Don't think of which frequencies you need to boost or which frequencies you need to cut, but rather just think about how you want to shift the energy of the sound that you're working on. So essentially these guitars had a ton of energy in the mids. That's where the bulk of the energy was. But we just wanted to kind of shift that up a little bit. So by cutting a little bit in the mids and boosting a little bit over here, we're just rebalancing the tone. We're not trying to give it more high mid so it cuts through. We're just trying to kind of subtly shift the tone of this instrument so that it fits a little bit better with the rest.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down at the worst time when you were down when you needed me to just stick around. I just vanished on you.
So that's a much better sound already. Take a listen to it soloed out. So in addition to the mid-range work that we've done, we also added a little bit of beef with the lows and also just a little bit of that airy grunge layer in this Air Plus slider. It sounds really cool on guitars. I like what it does to the sound. So right now we've just really opened up this guitar tone, and we took all the energy that used to be focused in the mids and we kind of pushed it out a little bit more. We gave more to the high mids, a little bit more to the lows, and just overall spread it out so it's not right where the vocal needed to be. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of compression, and I especially love this FET compressor on guitars.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down at the worst time when you were down when you needed me to just stick around. I just vanished on you. You gave me your heart and I dropped it.
So we're just kind of catching the peaks. We're just doing a little bit of compression here just to make it feel a little bit bigger. I also like pulling this color knob down just a little bit, just opens up the compression a little bit more so it doesn't stifle the guitars, but rather kind of opens them up.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down at the worst time when you were down when you needed me to just stick around. I just vanished on you.
And last up, I'm going to use this Maximize module to kind of glue everything together. And I especially like this crush mode. Now this thing is insanely extreme. So we just need a little bit of it to really do a lot of work on this guitar.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down at the worst time when you were down when you needed me to just stick around. I just vanished on you. You gave me your heart and I dropped it. You gave me your trust and I broke it. I wish I could rewind and change what I did. The damage is done and I'm so out of it.
This is almost like having an energy or intensity slider. You can hear how when we push that up, it just adds the next level of intensity to these guitars. So let's take a listen to before and after all of this processing.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down at the worst time when you were down when you needed me to just stick around. I just vanished on you. You gave me your heart and I dropped it. You gave me your trust and I broke it.
So two things are happening when we bypass and unbypass, and this is how we know we did it right. The first is the guitars sound so much more in our face. The guitars have taken a big step forward in the mix. We can hear them very clearly. They sound much bigger. But the other thing that's also happening is the vocal has gotten much clearer. When we have this engaged now, even though those guitars sound much bigger, the vocal is actually clearer and easier to understand. So both of those things are happening, and that's how we know we achieved what we needed to. Take a listen again and focus on those two elements.
And it's not like it was the first time that I let you down at the worst time when you were down when you needed me to just stick around. I just vanished on you. You gave me your heart and I dropped it. You gave me your trust and I broke it. I wish I could rewind and change what I did.
So it's amazing how that works, but we know why it works. The reason it works is we've reduced the amount of frequencies that are clashing with the vocals in the guitars, and we've increased the frequencies where we could get away with it to bring those guitars forward more. We've also added a tiny little bit of dynamic processing and glue to keep those guitars in check so they don't overtake the vocal with some of their peaks, and the result is a much bigger sounding mix overall. Let's skip here where the guitars open up a bit more.
I'm so sorry I can't be what you want me to be. My fault, I keep fucking everything up.
So here we've got a much grungier sounding guitar. We might tweak the processing to kind of balance between things. I might pull this down just slightly just to give us a little bit less grunge.
I'm so sorry I can't be what
So this is the power of good mix placement. If you know how to place the different elements in the right spots in the mix, everything can sound big and clear without stepping on everything else. So pay attention to this in your mixes. I like using X-Rack Pro for this because everything that I need is right there to shape the tone, and it just results in a much more vibrant sounding mix. Every one of these algorithms sounds fantastic, and I can get so many different tones right here. Of course, this is the direction I wanted to take these guitars, but it's completely subjective. You could go in any direction you want with all these different analog modeled curves and saturation modes and compressors. It's a lot of fun to mix with. So try this out next time you're working with guitars. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe for more tutorials like this, and as always, happy mixing.